Fantasy football ADP review. Is Adams overvalued? We're here to discuss 5 players that will make or break your fantasy team starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. What's up, Razzball fanatics? Welcome back to another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Today, we got another great Razzball great on the show today. We're going to bring him on in just a second to talk about 5 players that can make or break your fantasy team that are going in the top 2 rounds. And of course, we use the latest, the greatest Razzball ADP data that you can find on Razzball.com. So make sure you're checking out all the great ADP we have on there: Sleeper, Yahoo, ESPN. If you're a best ball person, we got best ball 10s, NFC, and underdogs. Make sure you're going to Razzball.com to check it out. But also make sure you go to Razzball.com to check out all the great articles on the baseball side. We also have basketball, hockey, and football, of course, on the website. So make sure you're checking everything out on Razzball.com. Also, make sure you're subscribing. I know you're watching, and some of you guys aren't subscribing to our YouTube channel. Listen, we're going to be doing this all summer long. So hit that subscribe button. Like, review, do it all. Let us know what you think about all these great rookie previews we're doing. And today we'll be breaking down the ADP stuff. But finally, make sure you're going to Razzball Fantasy IG and TikTok if you want some more daily content from Razzball. All right, enough's enough. We're going to bring in my co-host for today. The man, you can find him at Stan_Sun on Twitter. He's also one of the greatest legends of Razzball. You can find all his content on Razzball.com. What's going on, son?
What's going on, Bobby? Much appreciated. Before I get started, I just want everyone to know, man, follow Bobby. He's been grinding, putting out a ton of good content, YouTube, getting that channel going. So yeah, man, give him some props and give him a follow, do all that good stuff.
This is what I'm talking about. A little cross promotion. I tell you to go follow Stan_Sun on Twitter. You go follow his content. He shows the love right back. And that's why he's probably going to be on this show a lot more. Well, today I'm excited.
Hold on. Before we begin, before we got onto the show, Bobby, he's basically the Moses of Razzball now, right?
Nice.
So he's coming down from Mount Sinai with the tablets. So he's gonna lead everyone to the promised land. So I think you should change your Twitter handle, Bobby, aka Moses, right?
All right. Listen, there's a lot of things. Now I have a takeaway for the show. Next thing you know, I'll be asked to do like the 10 commandments of Razzball, and I'll be on it. I'll do it all. Any biblical things going on, I'll take care of it from now on at Razzball.com. But we're here. Actually, son, you're on a great show today. We're excited to bring up the top. We looked at the top 24. We're looking at 5 players going in the top 2 rounds that could make or break your fantasy team in 2022. And, I had you look into this. You sent me some great notes. We actually had to whittle it down to 5. We actually had some honorable mentions. Leonard Fournette was on that list. We also had Tyreek Hill as some of the players that we were either fading or excited about. But let's start at number 5. You talked a little bit about Josh Allen. Is he someone that you think is going to make or break someone's fantasy team? Currently going at 24th overall, according to RazzballADP.com.
Yeah. Well, do you mind if I kind of like ramble on a little bit? Just kind of, I do want to say something before I get into the players. I think we've all played fantasy, a ton, and like through the years, I've played, plenty of tuition to the University of Fantasy. So, I think, the ADP, we went through the top, 24 players, so the first 2 rounds, and the thing that I've learned is like there's no need to be a hero in the first 2 rounds, right? And I think a lot of people get caught up into that. They're like looking for the upside, but like there's no point. Like, don't be a hero, like, because everybody in those top 2 rounds, like they're good players, right? So the thing is you want to exploit inefficiencies, hunt for upside later, right? In the first couple of rounds, you want safety, right? You want bankable points, right? To have a good foundation to kind of build your team upon. So, we're all in the, prognosticating business, but, we're all acting on incomplete information, right? So I think the goal is to try to just negate as many question marks as possible and just have a solid foundation to go, to build upon your team. So, with that said, Josh Allen, I mean, we're just talking about bankable points, right? And so he's one of the most bankable QBs out there. He was the highest scoring QB in PPR formats last season. He has rushing equity. So, from that perspective, like it's all good, right? Like he's gonna be, one of the top, I mean, I would say top 3 players, at the position, unless, he gets hurt or something like that, right? But the thing is it's opportunity cost, right? So last year, Justin Herbert, he scored 1.3 points per game fewer than Allen. Tom Brady, 1.7 per game, fewer than Allen. So they were being able to draft. You were able to draft them, what, 4 or 5 rounds later. I forgot the exact ADP, but you were able to get them much later. So, when I'm looking at the ADP, list this year, I mean, I see Lamar Jackson down at 50, right? Dak Prescott's down at 60. Russell Wilson, I think it was like near 70. All those guys have upside that they may not exceed Josh Allen, but I think they can come pretty damn close, right? And you're gonna save what 3, 4 rounds of draft capital there, and I just think that's huge. I don't think there's any, like, you're paying for the ultimate upside, the ultimate ceiling, and I don't think it's really necessary to do that with Allen.
Yeah, and I will say this too. With Josh Allen last year, Pro Football Reference does value-based drafting analysis on their website, which is really cool. 9 quarterbacks out of 12 that you could start. So 9 quarterbacks actually gave you value over replacement. So that means that basically 75% of the starting caliber quarterbacks gave you value. For example, only 12 running backs, that's 50% out of the top 24. So that's kind of your point. It's a little edge. The one thing I will say about Josh Allen is that if he does take another level, if Gabriel Davis, for example, takes another step in the red zone, if Jamison Crowder, gives him another dynamic threat in the red zone, he could take another step. So I don't necessarily hate Josh Allen. I just think that, like you said, taking him at the 2-3 turn when you can get a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, for example, at the 6-7 turn, doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's jump down to number 4, Aaron Jones. So let's talk a little bit about Jones. Did he make or break?
Yeah, I mean, I love Jones at that cost. I think, I mean, honestly, I don't know why a lot of people are fading him. I guess maybe because of, you got AJ Dillon there, for splitting carries. But, here's the thing, Devonte Adams is no longer on that team. So, in 69 games, right, Jones, he's averaged 3.6 targets, 2.6 average reception per games. Without Adams, sample size is small. Granted, it's only 8 games, but the targets spiked up to 5.9 targets and 4.5 receptions. He had the second most targets behind Adams on the team last year. I think it was like 63. 53 red zone looks, led the team, 9th most in the league. Last year, Jones was the 10th RBI running back in PPR scoring. He only scored 29 points fewer than Connor, who ended up 5th, right? So, AJ Dillon had 187 carries last year, right? But he's a 0 in the passing game. Jones missed 2 games, right? He still had 171 carries. So, actually in Jones's case, it's kind of like the Kamara thing. Like, you really don't want him grinding. Like, you don't want him to grind down and risk of injury. So, like, to keep him fresh and to utilize him in the role that he's in is actually a plus. And say he does play the extra 2 games, he plays 17 games. He's going to get uptick in targets with no Devonte Adams. Man, I really love him. I really love him this year.
I will say with Aaron Jones, and I want to bring this to everyone's attention, that there was a shift in red zone work once he came back from his injury. So weeks 12 to 17, we did see A.J. Dillon take over that red zone and goal line work. So that does concern me a little bit because we saw his touchdowns plummet. And this is a guy who saw a lot of his production out of touchdowns in 2019 and 2020. So that is something where you hesitate a little bit, but overall, he should see that uptick in pass game work to make up for that. Let's jump down to number 3. I think a lot of people love this guy. I think a lot of people are excited for him. It's CeeDee Lamb. So give us your 2 cents on CD.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas, they passed at the 5th highest rate last season. I don't see that changing, right? They have the 10th easiest schedule. Dak Prescott was coming off the injury. So, that passing game potentially has the chance to be better, right? Gallup is hurt. Lamb, he's now the bona fide alpha. Amari Cooper's out of town. Um, you know, that offense has so much talent on it, and it's going to be hard to bracket him, right? Because of the other threats. And so, I guess one part of it is, okay, so maybe the targets decrease, but I mean, he had 111 targets his rookie year, following 120 in the sophomore year, right? Now he's the bona fide alpha. And even if they do have other weapons, Dalton Schultz, he's still going to get, I mean, probably at least the floor is 120, and there's a chance he gets to 140, 150, right? So, the beautiful thing about CeeDee Lamb is that, they use him all over the formation, right? His 320 snaps in the slot, 606 outside. They even lined him up 13 times out of the backfield. So it's going to be really hard for defenses to bracket him and focus him. And now that he's the alpha, I mean, he's going to be the guy in one of the most pass happy offenses in the league.
So I want to talk a little bit about CeeDee Lamb myself, because something came up when I was doing my research. So 10 games last year that he actually played without Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup versus 6 games with both of them in the lineup. When you look on the surface, it's hard to explain, but he had 16 points per game with both Cooper and Gallup and only 13.7 when one of them missed. I don't know why, but 2.3 points per game in PPR less when one of them missed. Now, the big reason I saw was the usage in the slot. 66% of his snaps were in the slot when they both played versus only roughly 25 to 27% when one of them missed. So he does play a lot more on the outside. However, this is a fool's gold. I actually had to dig further because I didn't believe it, and I was right. Because if you look at his actual production, wide versus slot, okay? His yards per target goes from 10.7 out wide down to 8.3 in the slot, okay? 2.48 yards per route run out wide to only 1.72 in the slot. So right there, he had 4 touchdowns to only 2 in the slot, 590 yards to 392 in the slot. So yes, even though his points per game doesn't look great last year, when you actually dive into his numbers, he is so much more productive outside. So that's why I'm excited. I'm back on CeeDee Lamb at 17, so I'm excited for him. Let's jump down to number 2. Devonte Adams is number 2 here. Let's talk about Devonte in Las Vegas.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. I just, to me, I don't know if he's overvalued, undervalued. To me, there's just a lot of question marks, right? So, he's going to a new team. He's going to be with a new quarterback and a new offense. And, I mean, I feel like part of the narrative of why people are so high on him is because of his relationship with Derek Carr, right? But, they haven't played in 8 years, man. Like 8 years, I was actually skinny 8 years ago, right? Like Twinkies, like, once it gets to 8 years, like Twinkies start expiring, like wine and meat, like, they start getting the age designation. Like 8 years is a long freaking time, right? So I just don't buy into that narrative, right? Like, yeah, okay, so maybe they have some sort of connection, but I don't think that's a reason why you should, elevate him. So, when I break it down, like in Green Bay, like he was the bona fide alpha, right? So he had 169 targets last year. The rest of the team, only 2 other players had 60, right? The prior year, he had 149 targets, only 2 other players had 60. 2019, he had 127 targets, only 2 other players had 60, right? So he completely dominated target share. Now he's arriving in Las Vegas where Hunter Renfrow had over 100 targets, right? Darren Waller was 90 targets, but he actually missed some games. Renfrow, they just re-signed him. So, the pie, I mean, there's guys that are gonna take, more slices of the pie. Now, that's not to say that Adams is not going to be the alpha of the team. Like, he probably will lead the team in targets, but I don't think he's going to have the target share that he had in Green Bay. And, so now he's also going from Aaron Rodgers down to Derek Carr. Right? I mean, that's a huge downgrade, right? However you slice it, like that's a downgrade. So, all those things combined together. All right. So if you want to break it down, like 2018, like if you're going back to the Packer days, he did have 169 targets. 3 other players on that team had 60. Jimmy Graham had 91 targets. So that is kind of comparable to the Raiders, the Los Angeles Raiders current like roster, and there's a possibility that the pie could get divvied up like that. But the thing is Green Bay, they were second in pass attempts that season. I don't see that happening this year with Las Vegas because Josh McDaniels, the last 2 years, the Patriots were 24th in pass attempts. In 2020, they were 31st. Now, last year, you can kind of write it off as, having a rookie quarterback. So, okay, that makes sense. We could kind of, throw it out of the way. But the prior year, they were dead last in pass attempts, and they had some guy named Tom Brady, right? So, I feel like they're going to be pretty balanced. I don't see them being in the top 10 in pass attempts. And, they're just, could he, could he get 170 targets? Yeah, definitely. It's within the range of outcomes for sure. He's a great talent. He could get a ton of red zone targets. Like, so yeah, so that's why I say it's a question mark. But when I dig into everything, there's just too many question marks, and I think there's too many other receivers that I like behind him or lower down in the ADP rank for me to kind of swing him there at number 5.
I will say this. You forgot about the Cam Newton year. So Cam Newton, before Mac Jones, it was Cam Newton. So that's why the passing tests were so low. But you're right. There wasn't really that much upside in the. I mean, listen, early Tom Brady, Josh McDaniels. You remember Randy Moss, right? You would think maybe he could use him like Randy Moss. So there is that level of ridiculous upside. But I did want to look into this because he is a new player, a new changing teams on a team that's also got a brand new coaching staff. So I actually looked at this over the last. Since 2011, there's been 55 top 5 wide receivers, 11 years, times it by 5. Only 7 of them were on brand new teams that year. So that means only 12% of your wide receiver, top 5 wide receivers were on new teams. So it does lean towards the other way. You want consistency, guys on the same team. I digged a little further and I actually found out from top 5 wide receivers since 2010, only 4 receivers finished in the top 5 and changed teams the next year. Jarvis Landry, DeAndre Hopkins, Brandon Lloyd, and Randy Moss. Only DeAndre Hopkins finished in the top 5 again. So 1 out of 4 is not great. So overall, I do think there is a little bit of I would fade him as well. Let's jump down to the last one. It's Derrick Henry. Talk to us a little bit about Derrick Henry if you're fading or buying him.
Yeah, I'm fading him. That run from 2018 to 2020, I mean, it's pretty remarkable. 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, double-digit touchdowns. He had over 300 carries, 2019, 2020. And then he went for the 2,000-yard season in 2020, right? So in the history of the NFL, there have been 7 other backs who have eclipsed 2,000 yards. Eric Dickerson, Adrian Peterson, Jamal Lewis, Barry Sanders, Terrell Davis, Chris Johnson. Now, if you look at after they hit this 2,000-yard season, Eric Dickerson, he played 8 more seasons after. He went for at least 1,510 touchdowns in only 2 seasons. AP played 9 seasons, went 1,210 twice. Jamal Lewis played 6 more seasons, didn't score double-digit touchdowns and he rushed over 1,200 yards only once. Barry Sanders played 1 more season. Granted, that was near the end of his career, but he went, 1,491, 4 touchdowns. Terrell Davis played 3 more seasons. He rushed for 211, 282, 701 yards. Chris Johnson played 8 more seasons, rushed over 1,200 yards twice, 1 season with 11 touchdowns. I did forget O.J. Simpson, but whatever. We're not going to go into O.J. The glove don't fit, right? So Derrick Henry last year, he missed 9 games due to foot surgery. So he came back. He looked good in the playoffs, right? But he's 28 years old. He's going to be turning 29. He has 1,401 career carries to name. There's no more AJ Brown on the team, right? He doesn't catch passes, and I think that's one of the main reasons why a lot of people used to fade him, right? And so, they got burned the last couple of years, right? But I mean, the floor just seems so low to me, right? There's just so many question marks, right? Like he's coming to an age where, he looks like he may be starting to break down, right? Doesn't catch passes, right? He's so game script dependent. And I mean, the situation has changed, right? They lost their alpha. So, I mean, now defenses are going to be able to put more attention onto him. Yeah, man, at number 5, that's just way too high for me. Like, if he slides down, yeah, then I have no problem, with but the risk reward, it just seems just completely unfavorable to me. And yeah, it's a fade for me.
On the injury front, Pro Football Doc did say that he feels that he's primed for a bounce back. So the good news is, from an injury standpoint, Pro Football Doc is stating that he thinks he could bounce back. However, when you start looking at the situation around him, it started deteriorating. First, he lost Arthur Smith. They go to Todd Downing. Doesn't really work last year. Then they lose Corey Davis. They lose A.J. Brown. Now they're also losing offensive linemen. They lost Roger Saffold. They lost their right tackle. Even though they drafted a kid in the 2nd round last year, that's a lot of movement now. You're talking offensive line. And now Ryan Tannehill, previously was a borderline top 12 quarterback last year, is going outside the top 20. So you do want to have a good quarterback for fantasy. You also want to have a good offensive line. He doesn't have either of those things right now. So I am a little concerned from that standpoint. But it does sound like there is optimism on the injury front. Well, that's it, folks. That's the 5 players that we wanted to bring to your attention that could make or break your fantasy team. We were super excited. We'll be back probably next week at some point or very soon with our man Son to talk a little bit about the later rounds, maybe 3rd and 4th. We don't know. We're going to leave you hanging on that. Like Moses, I'm departing from this podcast. I'm out. So listen, once again, make sure you're following the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Also, make sure you follow Razzball Fantasy on TikTok and IG. And make sure you go to Razzball.com. If you want to see ADP data, folks, go to Razzball.com and check it out. We have a bunch of sites. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. For that man, Son, we appreciate you joining us. We're out of here.